Staying up later, I guess it's tennis week. Last night, Chris Evert, and tonight, arguably the greatest women's player of all time, Martina Navratilova. Take us back to your childhood. When did you first pick up a racket in Czechoslovakia?
I was about 5 years old, and it was a very heavy one. It was an old racket, like 1910. It was my grandmother's racket, and it had a wooden grip, and it was pretty heavy, so I just hit two-handed backhands against the wall for a couple of years. Then my father put me on a court for the first time when I was 7. And that's when I started trying to hit a forehand as well. So I was pretty late beginner as far as kids are concerned today. But also the rackets back then, you couldn't play when you were 3 years old because you couldn't hoist it up.
When you say your father, it's the man who became your father, but your natural father had divorced from your mother when you were only 3 or 4.
Right.
And then your stepfather became, in effect, your coach or your inspiration.
He didn't know much about tennis. He played tennis, but he didn't know how to teach it. And I had a coach, George Parma, from the age of 9 till 12. Then George left the country, and my father learned pretty much everything from George Parma. So then my father was my coach from when I was 12 till I left the country, and still over the phone. Even after I left Czechoslovakia, he's still telling me over the phone what I was doing wrong. It was pretty funny.
You were 11 when the Soviet tanks rolled into Czechoslovakia. What do you remember about that?
I was almost 12. Played a tournament in Pilsen. I was staying with my best friend, or doubles partner also, who actually was the niece of Vera Sukova, who was a late Czech tennis player who got to the finals of Wimbledon as the mother of Helena Sukova. Anyway, so Vera and I were sleeping, and her father called us up about 6:30 in the morning. He had already been at work, and he called us and said, "Don't go outside, there are tanks outside." So we stayed in bed, played cards for a while, and then it dawned on us what was happening, so we started walking around, and then my father came for me later in the day on a motorcycle, and we rode back to my hometown, which is about 50 miles away, and saw lots of military vehicles and tanks on the way back, and the roads were already torn up that, you know, the tanks tore up, so it was pretty depressing. I was yelling at them, you know, obscenities in Czech, but they didn't understand.
When was the first time you recall some sort of yearning within you to get out of there? To live a different sort of life? Well,
I didn't know. I always knew I wasn't going to have a 9-to-5 job, or in Czechoslovakia at 7 to 3, because I was not an early person. But I didn't realize that tennis was going to be my way out. I played a sort of an inter-club competition. I was 13. We played in West Germany, and I knew then that one day I would leave Czechoslovakia and live in the West. And then I realized tennis was the best way out. But that really was not my initial reason why I was playing tennis, but it became part of it. I wanted to travel the world, and I wanted to get out of the country.
Didn't Czechoslovakian officials begin to suspect, even before you made your move finally in the mid-70s, we better keep an eye on her? She's sort of teetering on the brink here.
Yeah, well, I never did conform very well. I don't suffer authority with a smile on my face, and that was a problem, because the people that you don't even know were telling you how to live your life, what school to go to, what kind of a school, what job you should have, how many tournaments you should play, who you should be nice to, who you shouldn't be nice to, who you should talk to, who you shouldn't talk to.
Join the Communist Party, make a big pretense of it if you're going to represent the country in any way.
Come to the communist gatherings, or whatever they call them, the Congress, you know, and pretend I'm a little communist athlete, and I just couldn't do that. Our family was thinking about leaving, but decided we weren't going to. But rumors started that we were leaving, and the whole family was in fact at Wimbledon in '75, and we came back. We drove back to Czechoslovakia and went to Pilsen again. The Czech championships were being played there, and everybody said, "Oh my God, what are you doing here?" They thought we left the country already. And we hadn't, but those rumors hurt me, and then the Tennis Federation didn't want to let me play tournaments anymore. They didn't want to let me play the U.S. Open or in America, because they called me too American, and that I was too friendly with the American players like Chris and Billie Jean and Rosie Casals, and they said they weren't going to let me play in the States. And that's where about 90% of the tournaments were at the time, was in the United States. So Jan Kodeš intervened a little bit, a Czech tennis player, and helped me get out of the country at the time, and personally vouched for me. And that's when I stayed here. I didn't go back. That was at the 1975 U.S. Open.
So even though there was no doubt in your mind that this was what you had to do, how frightened, what kind of emotions were you experiencing when you actually arrived at that moment and you knew that you were going to defect, that you were going to leave people behind?
I don't think it hit me until later, because you know, I was 19 years old, not quite, and I thought life was going to be easy. I mean, I was here, I was making money, I spoke English, I had friends here. I thought I would see my family soon. I didn't know it was going to be 4 years before I saw my mother, and 5 years before I saw my father and my sister, and 15 years before I saw my grandmother. So, you know, it was one of those decisions you just make when you're young, because you think you're going to live forever, so is everybody else. And, you know, it doesn't work out that way, but...
How much of a conflict was it? Obviously, you were doing not only what you wanted to do, but what you were born to do, to excel in tennis. And with that comes tremendous rewards. But the irony is overwhelming. You're in a situation where, in a capitalist country, where the material rewards are coming to you hand over fist, and people that you care about are in an exact opposite situation. How conflicted were you emotionally about that?
Well, the most difficult part was I could send my family money. So actually, financially, they were, you know, very well off. In Czechoslovakia, the dollar went a long way. But the difficult part was not knowing if there were going to be repercussions against my family, against my parents' jobs. In fact, my father did lose his job for a while, although he didn't have to be a janitor or anything, but he lost his post at the factory where he worked, in the office. And my sister couldn't get into the school that she wanted to go to. She got kicked off the tennis team in Prague, had to play on a smaller team. You know, she became a dentist instead of an artist because she couldn't get into the right school.
The Czechoslovakian government declared you, as so many others were declared in Eastern Bloc countries, a non-person.
Mm-hmm.
And then, all of a sudden, with the sweeping events of a year ago, the Iron Curtain comes down.
Yeah.
Is there any way to describe what you felt as you watched from a distance and the world changed?
It happened, obviously, much quicker than anybody thought. Going back, I went back in '86 to play Federation Cup, and that was the first time I went back since I left. And it was a very, very emotional experience in many ways, but the biggest, the most difficult part was leaving the country. I cried when I left, not when I got there, because I realized all those people couldn't leave. You know, I can get on a plane and leave because I have my American passport, but those people are stuck there, sort of a prison for 15 million people. And I was really sad for them. And now I went back in May, and you know, it's like this curtain, not an iron curtain, but it's been lifted. And
what was the difference between the way people reacted to you in '86 and the way they reacted once the world had changed and once they didn't have to fear the reaction to their own response in 1990?
Yeah, exactly. They were very warm, and the common folk were incredible, even when I was there 4 years ago. But the officials, obviously, there was no recognition. In fact, when the U.S. won, we beat Czechoslovakia in the finals, the officials left before the ceremony because they didn't want to give me the trophy. Now, I've met with President Havel several times. Vera Čáslavská, who was an Olympic gymnast in the 60s, is on his council, and I met her finally. She was my childhood hero. And I was invited, I just happened to be there on the 17th of May, which was the half-year anniversary of the Velvet Revolution. And they had a little gathering on Wenceslav Square. So Vera asked me if I would like to come and say hi to the people from the balcony where the president was going to speak. I said, God, I would love that. You know, I had a busy 3 days there, but I didn't want to miss that. Yeah. So I said, sure. Then later they told me, oh, by the way, you have to make a speech in Czech. Just a short one. I go, oh my God, how am I going to speak Czech to all these people? But so I made something up, and then when I got there, it was just a couple thousand people on the square. I said, oh, that's no big deal. Then President Havel spoke, and I saw him afterwards, and I said, what do I say? What do I say? So he told me something, so I wrote it down, and then I get out there 15 minutes later, and there's over 100,000 people in the square, and you're like about on the 3rd floor balcony, and you look down, and there's nothing but heads. And it was the most incredible feeling. And then they start chanting. They start clapping when they realize
Chanting
that
your
was me.
name?
Yes. And clapping, and it was incredible. It was the biggest surge of adrenaline I ever had in my life.
It gave you an opportunity, and all of us, at least most of us, look to close the book in some symbolic way on important emotional chapters in our lives. And people that find themselves separated from their homeland have these long, long gaps before they can tie the thing together. And in your case, it involved saying goodbye to your grandmother and to your natural father.
Yes, I went to see their grave. I tried to do that 4 years ago, but I didn't want to go during the tournament, so I saved it until the last day, and then I got there, the cemetery was closed. They had just closed. I thought about climbing the fence, but then I thought, no, I better not. I get in trouble. So I went this year, and my grandmother's and my father's ashes were scattered on this little half-an-acre plot in the middle of the cemetery. So I said a very emotional goodbye, and when I got back, now I can at least talk about it without crying. I mean, I finally, put it in its proper place where I can think about my grandmother and have a smile on my face instead of starting crying. But it really, I got back to Aspen, and I was a wastebasket emotionally. And I thought it was because I started panicking about Wimbledon. It was couple months away, and I was really getting close, and I thought I was just panicking whether I had prepared properly for Wimbledon. What should I do now? Is my forehand going to hold up? All that stuff. And then I realized it wasn't. It was the trip to Czechoslovakia where I finally was able to put it in its proper place. Not just the grandmother and father, but everything.
Continuing now with Martina Navratilova, it's obvious that you're an emotional person. It's part of what fires your game.
How can you say that?
just my sense of things. How badly did it hurt you that it took so long for you to become a sentimental favorite, especially with American audiences?
Well, with Chris America being my biggest rival, it wasn't difficult. I think I came on a little strong. When I first defected, I got very defensive with the press and the public for good reasons, but I didn't know how to handle the press. I didn't get any lessons about how to answer questions and what to say, et cetera, et cetera. And I've always shown my emotions on the sleeve a little too much, perhaps, but that's how I am. But Chris has always been, the perfect model for everybody. And I had to compete with that, not just on the court, but off the court as well. So that was difficult. We're very much alike, but people only see the opposites. Our games attract that as well. She doing the most with her baseline game, whereas I'm the big bad guy, always beating up on her, coming to the net, attacking at every opportunity.
You were Goliath, and not only that, for the most simplistic purposes, a foreign Goliath, and she was an American David.
Right, and I was bigger than Chris is. I'm not big by any standards, but now, the Sabatini, Graf, they're towering over me. But next to Chris, I looked big, big muscles, and big build. I play a big game. I'm size 8, 5'7.5". I'm not a giant by any means, but next to Chris, I looked like one, and I played that kind of a game. So that was threatening in itself, and I always spoke my mind, and that got me in trouble. But what can I say? I can't lie.
Was there ever a legitimate source of friction between the two of you? Not something the press made up or exaggerated, but a point where you were honestly angry at her or she at you?
Well, there would be some things that she would say or didn't say. I knew she felt a certain way about something but didn't want to be controversial, so she didn't say anything. Things that would bother me, and I would talk about them, and she wouldn't talk about them. I can't say that, because that's not up to me to reveal. If she doesn't want to talk about it, then I'm not going to talk about it. But she has become a lot more outspoken and a lot more her own person. I think she was really sheltered by her family and brought up to be Miss Proper, and she's really come and grown into her own person in the last, 4 or 5 years. Andy Mill has had a lot to do with that. She's a lot more extroverted now, and I think she really likes herself a lot better now. I think she has a better time also.
Well, she was here last night, and one of the questions that we asked was, of course, about the rivalry between the two of you. And in her opinion, she thought that when Nancy Lieberman got close to you and said, look, you've got to develop that real eye of the tiger kind of thing toward this woman. This isn't just some thing that you look at dispassionately. You've got to develop a hatred, an athletic hatred for her. Here's what Chris said.
Uh-oh.
You know, she had this theory that Martina was losing to me because she was too nice to me, because she liked me too much, and she had this theory that you really have to dislike your opponent if you want to win. You have to sort of get that killer instinct going. And Martina, I can see where it would happen, because Martina had no killer instinct, you know, a long time ago. She's just so happy to be in America from Czechoslovakia, and Nancy pretty much drummed it in her, you know, hate Chris, and you'll play better. And unfortunately, it worked. You know, it was bad for our relationship, but she started beating me once she got that killer instinct going.
She right?
Well, there's absolutely some truth to it. It was not just with Chris, but everybody else, but with Chris in particular. But Nancy made me feel like Chris has she took something away from me, which was the #1 spot in winning Wimbledon. And in order to get it, you have to get it from her. And, you know, so you have to not like her, because otherwise you won't get it. And I think in basketball, because of the physical contact, you get a lot more emotional dislike of your opponent because of that physical contact. In tennis, there is none, so there isn't that kind of friction. But, you know, Nancy would tell me if she was changing sides, she would be talking to her. You know, she'd be talking trash on the changeovers. And I said, you can't do that. This is tennis. But she did get me tougher mentally, where I just really wanted to win, and I felt Chris took it away from me, and I got to get it back. So there was some friction because of that.
There was a U.S. Open. I can't remember which one, but the image of it just popped into my head. You beat her, and it was tough. It was hard fought. She had an early lead. You came back and beat her. And in the end, it was clear that the crowd was sympathetic toward Chris. In the end, although you had won, you broke down in tears.
Mm-hmm.
And as I saw it from a distance, and there may have been a lot of things wrapped up in this that I didn't know, but as I saw it from a distance, it seemed to me that what was running through your head was, how could I work any harder? How could I be any truer to my craft? How could I be any more gracious to my opponent? And I don't care if they're cheering her, but who cast me as the villain here?
Yeah.
And there was a release of emotion there that it was very affecting to me watching. I had never even met you.
That's exactly what it was. I felt like I was playing Chris and 15,000 people. It was rough, because the year before, in '81, I lost to Tracy Austin in the finals, but I was the underdog, and they cheered me on. I mean, you know, it was an emotional moment. I cried because the crowd was so nice. And then in '83, I beat Chris for the first time at the Open. And they were pulling for me because I never won it. So people were happy for me that I won it. But then I kept winning. I was winning everything. It was like Steffi Graf the last couple of years been steamrolling. People just want her to lose. They don't want to see the other person to win. They want her to lose. And they wanted me to lose. And on top of that, I was playing Chris. And it was very difficult. I felt like I really had to control myself during the match and not let it get to me. And I said, why don't they, you know, why are they like this? And then I saw Bill Cosby, and he just called them 18,000 underachievers. He said, don't worry about them. They don't know what they're doing.
Recently, Margaret Court had a quote, something to the effect, Martina is a great tennis player, but because of lifestyle, she's not a good role model. Have you responded in any way to that?
Well, I try not to. We all have our definitions of what a role model is, and hers is different from most people's. When she played in South Africa in 1970s, she was criticized for playing there, and she said, at least South Africa knows what the racial policy is. So that's how she felt about apartheid. So, you know, she's got maybe perhaps some warped idea of what this world should be like, but I was just disappointed that I thought she was a friend, and that she would, if she had some strong ideas like that, she would come up to me and say something to me first before going on press conferences on, you know, talking about it. And I thought her timing was pretty poor. You know, you can always find something wrong with somebody, and whether it's the way your hair is cut or what you think about abortion rights or whatever. I think the best way I like to lead is showing that you can achieve your goals without having to be a cutthroat or dishonest. You can say what's on your mind. You can be honest about your feelings and your emotions. You don't have to put anybody down to achieve what you want to achieve. And if you work hard enough, you can achieve it. So I like to hope that I just inspire people instead of them saying, oh, I don't like the way she looks, or, you know, her nose is too big or whatever, which it is.
The 9-time Wimbledon champion Martina Navratilova swings back into action here in New York this coming Monday as the Virginia Slims tournament begins. Thanks very much for spending the time with us.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
It's 2 in the morning, at least in some places, so go to bed. See you later.
Where did CBS This Morning's Paula Zahn come from? Find out Monday on Later.